in for Tim Burton movies, and partly because I believe that genre speaks better for him than Pirates does.
I don't know. It's Johnny. Yeah, it's been interesting because before Pirates of the Caribbean happened, Johnny Depp never played the same character twice. And one of the big things about
part of that though is because Tim Burton never did the same movie twice.
Yeah, and the last pirate movie, was, I don't know. Again, ladies and gentlemen, we're just going off, script here as usual. And I did not prepare for this. I didn't even think we were gonna, talk more than 30 seconds about Johnny Depp, even though how many times he's collaborated with Tim Burton over the years. But in the last one, the almost entire movie was about Johnny Depp, about Jack Sparrow, whereas in the other three, they had the love story between Will Turner and Elizabeth. And interesting enough, they're talking about Will Turner will possibly be back for the next Pirates of the Caribbean movie.
Yeah.
Orlando Bloom, for you Orlando Bloom lovers, and I know you're out there, he is rumored to be coming back.
See, I haven't been a big fan of Orlando Bloom, except for in Lord of the Rings.
Honestly, he hasn't really done a whole lot that's even worth mentioning for us anyways, other than, the Pirates movies and, the Lord of the Rings and the Hobbit movies.
I'm sorry, Lord of the Rings. That's all that comes to mind that has any warrant of mentioning is Lord of the Rings.
Well, considering that was the movie, literally, I think his first movie actually was Fellowship of the Ring.
Yeah, I'm sorry. Basically, the love connection between Gimli and Legolas will go down to history
the bromance
as the greatest love story in Hollywood.
I don't know, that is probably the original bromance right there. I mean, we're talking back to like the 1950s, bromance. I think it was a bromance before people knew what a bromance was.
I completely agree. And you know what? It'll go down as the greatest love story in Hollywood history. You can't get better than an elf and a dwarf. Nope, I can't think of anything.
No kidding, right?
All
right.
We are going to take a quick studio break and gather our words and wits, and we will be right back after these messages. Welcome back to the Captain Fizz and Mask Guys show. So, we're going to move on to our next subject, and of course, I believe for the first time ever, Star Wars.
We've, touched on it in the past, but I mean, I've been really pushing on this. I was hoping actually to do an episode about Star Wars last week. Unfortunately, just due to some issues, we didn't actually do a second episode last week, and went off and just reintroduce everyone to our very first episode last week instead. Yeah. Which, honestly, if you listened back then...
We sucked.
I apologize. But, you all have to start somewhere. And, as the old phrase goes, the journey of 1,000 miles starts with a single step. That was step one.
See, in my case, the journey of 1,000 miles starts with me falling on my face.
Yes. Okay, so the reason why I've been really pushing on this is there's been a lot of news recently about Star Wars, and the thing that I really want to talk about is how they are apparently how there's no Sith. Kylo Ren is apparently not a Sith Lord at all.
See, and I'm not entirely sure if I like that idea, because Star Wars has always had Sith Lords, Sith Masters, Sith Apprentices, Sith something.
Well, But here's the thing: if you go into to the expanded universe that used to exist before Disney bought everything up, there was a lot of quote unquote dark Jedi that weren't actually considered to be Sith Lords. They were just Force users that decided to embrace the dark side as opposed to the light side with the Jedi.
But see, in reality, if you go back to it, Anakin technically was the same, a dark Jedi. He embraced the dark side and became Darth Vader, but he technically wouldn't be a Sith Lord either then.
But there's like a whole Sith teachings and everything, and apparently though, these aren't Sith. And I mean, Whoa! What the heck was that? Wow! I'm telling you,
my partner just became an idiot.
I know. I'm just using my phone as a reference here, and apparently a video tried to pop open to be very annoying. This is the difference between putting your phone on vibrate and putting it on silent, ladies and gentlemen.
But we're gonna ban phones next time.
That actually means I'd have to write notes, and I actually have to be able to read my own writing.
Yes.
No.
Yes. I can't even read your writing. Anyways,
so
no Sith Lord.
No Sith Lord, and of course the main dark Force users in this, of course, are Kylo Ren, who apparently, I mean, he is a member of the Knights of Ren, and there is Supreme Leader Snoke, who is a CGI character played by Andy Serkis, the famous Gollum from the Lord of the Rings movies. He did Caesar in the recent Planet of the Apes franchise,
which was actually a really good movie, but we're not going to go down that rabbit hole.
No, we're not. So it's just kind of interesting because they're saying they're not Sith Lords and they're just users of the dark side. And I want to go off and bring up some stuff that J.J. Abrams went off and kind of mentioned in regards to this. This is talking about the First Order as they're called. It's no longer the Empire. This is the First Order. It says that all came out of conversations about what would happen if the Nazis all went to Argentina, but then started working together again. What could be born of that? Could the First Order exist as a group that actually admired the Empire? Could the work of the Empire be seen as unfulfilled? Could Vader be a martyr? Could there be a need to see through what didn't get done? And
a lot of that could make sense with one of the trailers came out, and they're picking up Darth Vader's scarred mask, charred
mask. If you look at Kylo Ren's mask, it's got a very Darth Vader feel to it.
It's like Darth Vader and Boba Fett put together.
Yeah, it's it has that real Darth Vader like feel to it, and so I found this kind of interesting. If you go back and you check out some of the origins of Star Wars and everything, George Lucas did base the Empire off the Nazis. Yes,
no, and there is no secret on that, but it is very interesting. J.J. Abrams kind of following in that suit. Not a bad thing, not a good thing, but I'm kind of curious the storyline. If there's no Sith, you gotta wonder their motivation to be on the dark side.
Well, and again, there was a certain set of teachings by of the Sith Lords, and it's possible. Again, it's very possible to just have certain feelings, be able to do, use the dark side without going off and going by the same rules and stuff that the Sith Lords had.
But see, okay, the whole dark side, the Sith, is ruled by hate, fear, emotion, blah, blah, blah. To turn against all that and to embrace it so much, you can't really embrace so much without being the Sith. We've all grown up watching Star Wars. If you haven't, you're too young. Don't be listening to our show. But if you know the Star Wars and you've grown with them all and watched them all grow up, and you've seen the storyline, hated the storyline, loved the storyline, follow the CGIs and everything, all that. You know the dark side and the Sith plays a huge, huge role in the whole storyline of all 6 movies.
But here's the thing. Up until we got to the prequel trilogy, it was never actually revealed that Darth Sidious, the Emperor Palpatine, was even a Sith Lord. In fact, it was so much that when they did a series of comics called Dark Empire, that the Emperor goes to the Sith homeworld, and the Sith don't treat him as Sith ghosts that are there do not treat him as a fellow Sith Lord at all. In fact, they go off and ask Palpatine if he's willing to take Lord Vader's place. So, it wasn't actually revealed then. They just, had him portrayed as being just a dark Force user at that point.
But see, we didn't need to be told, who's a Sith Lord and who's not. You knew. You could feel who they were, and just from the beginning, you could tell how evil they were.
Well, exactly, but again, this goes back to if the writers and the people that were working for George Lucas to, write books and comics for the expanded universe, if they didn't know that Palpatine was actually, a Sith Lord, and that he was just a Dark Force user, why then does that suggest that there could be Dark Force users who don't go by, the religion known as the Sith?
See, I don't classify the dark side or the good side as a, religion of Sith or religion of, Force, so to speak.
Well, the Jedis, they had certain teachings. Now, it's very possible to use the Force, but not, live in the teachings that the Jedi had. It's very possible that there could have been people very powerful in the Force who did not, embrace a lot of those things and, had, married and had children. In fact, in the expanded universe, they, under Skywalker's Jedi Order, you were allowed to have kids. You were allowed to get married, whereas the order that we see in the prequel trilogy, all attachment was disallowed.
Now, and I completely do agree with you on that. I do question if what happened with Anakin was a huge factor in changing those rules, changing those laws, because you see Anakin, he was so far into the light side. He was a really good guy, and then the rules, the laws, the restrictions turned him into this really awful, I'm going to chop your hand off guy.
Well, here's the thing, though. Anakin was never really, really light. I mean, back from the beginning, when he first meets Yoda, one of the first things that Yoda goes off and says to him is, you have much fear. So, I mean, there was already that little tinge on the dark side in him from the very beginning, because here's a boy who grew up in slavery, was very resentful for everything that happened to him. And then we go off and we see what happens to his mother. Now, what he does, for us, that would make a lot of sense to go off and lash out. But for the Jedi, you can't show anger. Anger leads to the dark side.
See, and I don't necessarily always agree with that. But yes, okay, in the movie, that's how they portray it. But, it's teaching, the Jedi way is robotic and, closed off. And I don't think that's exactly the smartest idea for the Jedi. And maybe I resemble more the Sith than I do the Jedi, but that's besides the point.
But, going back to this, there were Jedi teachings. And even in the expanded universe, there was a Jedi Order who did not agree with what the actual Jedi Order was using. In fact, there was a Jedi Order who actually didn't use lightsabers. They actually used blasters instead.
Pew pew.
Pew pew. Yeah, exactly. And, there were, Jedi who, completely just walked away from the Order and did their own thing.
Yeah, and so they did kind of hint at that in the movies. I'm not sure if you actually got that resemblance or not when they were talking about, all the Jedi were spread out. They were kind of hinting at the fact that some of the, Jedi were not standing beside them.
They actually, well, they do. They